No, I'm lazy. Sometimes I just do the giant L. Welcome everyone to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. This is episode 103. Today we're going to be talking all about one of Canada's and Ontario's most ferocious and toothy fish, the musky. However way you spell it, with an IE or a Y. I prefer Y because it's actually grammatically correct, but we'll get into that later.
Why?
Exactly. But we have a super awesome guest today. If you've never watched this show before, I'm your host, I'm Jesse, and with me is my longtime fishing buddy, Andrew. You probably already knew that, but we get new listeners every single week from all across Canada and the US, and randomly in places in Africa too, and Europe. But anyway, we have a guest this week that is, I would say, a local hammer. Wouldn't you say, Andrew?
I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah. We have, drum roll please, Jonah, and I'm going to use his YouTube title last name because it's way cooler, Jonah VanGeest. How's it going, Jonah?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. This is awesome. Super excited to be here. Hopefully, help some people catch their first or catch more muskies this year.
Well, you have helped us catch muskies in the past, so I'm almost positive that any musky angler listening to this will learn at least one thing. So before we get into this super ferocious episode, we have, as tradition states, the interesting fishing fact. And to handle that, we have the man with the mustache and the beard and the sailfish on the wall behind him, Andrew. Or is that a marlin? I'm not sure.
It's a sailfish, yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell by the large sail.
Oh.
Come on.
That's fair.
You can tell Jesse's a freshwater guy.
Yeah.
Those idiots.
Says the guy who's never successfully been saltwater fishing. Oh.
I'm not far behind. I've only been like twice. So
going on to my actual interesting topic, I want to put you in a scenario. I want you to think of your favorite lake. That little honey hole that you spent years trying to find, that every time you go, it produces no matter what the weather. It's a trek getting in there, but it's worth it. And the next time that you go, you're all ready, you've taken your truck back country, you've portaged in, however you get there, and it's gone. The entire lake has disappeared. What are your thoughts?
Aliens.
How about you, Jonah? What's the first thing that comes through your head? Keep in mind, we are a PG podcast, so...
Man, I wouldn't even know what to think with that. How would a lake disappear?
I thought the same thing. It came as a shock to me that this could happen, and in fact has happened, and more wildly, has happened locally to us.
No way.
It blew my mind. So this is one documented case. This is from actually 1936. It's an older case. It was near Timmins. There was a small hidden lake, no big cottages. One time they went there and it was gone. The whole lake. You might think, what happened? Well, geologists were brought in and they figured that it's what was called a kettle lake. Have you heard that term before?
Yep.
Perfect. So Jonah might be ahead on this one than Jesse. Jesse looks very confused.
I'm more of a coffee person.
He's way off with that description. So... kettle lakes are formed when huge chunks of buried glacial ice melt and they leave behind a deep depression, essentially a big bowl that has the melted glacier in it. That's your lake. There are kettle lakes all around our province. Some areas are more frequent. And what happens though, when they slowly start to melt, they'll start to erode the ground underneath of them, leaving these little, just like the Grand Canyon eroded and formed this great canyon. There's underwater caverns or underground caverns that are eroded away slowly. And then in 1936, there was a drought and subtle seismic movement that caused the thin rock separating the lake from the hidden void underneath to collapse, and the entire lake drained into the earth just like you pulled a plug in a bathtub. That blew my mind. Like, that's terrifying.
That's crazy.
Now, it's not new. Indigenous communities, they had histories from about bottomless lakes or places that would swallow a canoe whole if the water grew restless and things like that. And they're actually grounded in real environmental knowledge. These things have happened before. So could it happen again? Answer is yes. Terrifyingly, yes, it could. So along with the Kettle Lake, which is again that depression that's formed when a glacier melts, there's something called karst topography. That's where you have a landscape where the ground underneath is often it's like a soft bedrock like limestone or dolostone that's easily worn away by the water. So it's more likely to have an underground cavern that could form a sinkhole, caves, underground rivers even. Areas where you have this karst topography is places like Bruce Peninsula, Manitoulin Island, Niagara Escarpment, and Eastern Ontario near like Perth and Smiths Falls, which for anyone wondering is kind of like between Kingston and Ottawa. These places have this karst topography. They also have a lot of areas that have kettle lakes that are very close by or in these same areas. So it's not just a super North Ontario thing. Even in the States, this has happened in 1980. Lake Peigneur in Louisiana, a salt mine beneath the lake collapsed and the entire lake drained into the mines. Lake Jackson in Florida, every few decades, it vanishes almost completely. Sinkholes open up and drain it. And the locals, they're used to it, and the rainwater eventually fills back up, but eventually it just goes away again. There's Lost Lake in Oregon. It disappears down a lava tube that's there. And sometimes, after winter, the snowmelt will fill it back up, then it drains again.
Wow.
Lake George in Ontario, it's near Georgian Bay. In the early 1900s, cottagers were shocked when the water levels just dropped in a few days. There was a confirmed sinkhole, but scientists did suspect that underground flow shifts or fault movement caused that rift to then open up and drain it. Gull Lake in Haliburton, some place that we've probably fished ourselves.
I've been there.
There's old newspaper clippings about locals remembering sudden water drops with no real explanation. Some blame, forgotten mine shafts. Other thinks it's natural caverns underneath. Things like this, even in Prince Andrew County, there's Lake on the Mountain. That's probably the best example of what a kettle lake is. Scientists still don't know where the water is coming from to keep this lake above waterline, above the water level, full of water. And that's just on the shores of Lake Ontario. So there's so many of these things that are around, and it just made me really scared for especially like the smaller lakes that I love fishing, the backcountry stuff. There's a good chance that in our lifetime, we could have one or two of these lakes just disappear.
Hopefully when we're not on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine how terrifying that would be.
That'd be one heck of a ride.
If you come across it, let authorities know. But yeah, there's lots of areas that are known for sinkholes and stuff like that, or even areas there's many times you'll see a depression in the ground, and that's from this old glacier melt. It's not listed as lakes or not listed as anything. There are lots of bogs, and yeah, these lakes have disappeared, or the glaciers have melted and they've drained away down into the earth, and now they're no longer lakes.
That's interesting.
That
I'm also just like contemplating my doom right now. Just picture my sports ball just going around in a circle, like a tub draining, and then
I was thinking a toilet just.
Yeah. It'd be the one day that
She gone.
I leave Andrew on the shore when he's sleeping in the morning. I don't wake him up. I'm like, poop to this guy. I'm gonna go by myself, and then he'll wake up and the lake will be gone, and I'll be gone. He's like, hello.
See, the fun fact is though, if you were in Australia and a lake drained, your sports ball would start spinning the other way.
Yeah, that is a fact. That's interesting. And then the transition that I'm going to say is, speaking of large things that sometimes are extremely hard to find, this episode we're going to talk all about musky.
I like it.
It's one of the one days that I've been the most excited for this year. We're kind of spoiled here in Southern Ontario that we do get early season bass, which is in zone 20. Me and Andrew went out this year. We went out last year, and you can slam a bunch of bass in a day. Like I'm talking 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 bass easily. It really helps you hold off. You're like, all right, I cracked, a bunch of fish in the mouth. I got some fish, but with musky, there's nothing like that. Not where we fish anyway. So we're really excited. When this podcast comes out, musky season is going to be coming out in the next week or two. So I know a lot of anglers are excited, but I also know a lot of anglers want to catch their first musky this year, or maybe their first decent sized musky. So that's why we have Jonah here, because he, like we mentioned, he's quite of a local hammer. But before we get into interviewing Jonah, I would like to mention this episode is brought to you by Waterwolf Lures. Everyone knows we love Waterwolf Lures. They're made right here in Ontario. They absolutely catch giant fish. Jonah's a big fan of the baits.
Oh, yeah.
We're big fans of the baits. And I know, we're friends with Mike as well. We've been in his shop. Well, I have, and he makes everything by hand, super good, legendary baits. They've been used for decades. And we'll talk a little bit more about his baits in a bit, and the giveaway that he's donated to the one lucky person. Hopefully it's me. I could use some more baits.
Andrew can mention too that they're 50 catchers.
That's right. This one particularly, I have very pleasantly been using, water wolf baits for as long as I've been musking fishing pretty much. So yep. I'm not stopping.
And Andrew's holding up the legendary Shadzilla, which is a big 9.5-inch swim bait. We're excited. But anyway, let's talk about Jonah for a second. Now, we always say to guests, why should people listen to you? So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your musky fishing journey and what you've been doing the last few years?
I started musky fishing seriously probably 2017, 2018. I was actually fishing in this Lucky Strike tournament that was online. I don't know if you guys remember it. I had somehow made it to the finals, and I was like, okay, how am I going to beat somebody like Rex St. Pierre? And there was a couple other big names, and I'm like, I got to go for a muskie. So I just took that weekend, went down to Lake St. Clair. It was my second time ever muskie fishing, and somehow got one and ended up winning that tournament. So the way I caught that muskie, he came right up to the wall, smacked it like figure eight, and instantly I was like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen or experienced. Like, I need more of this. And so I was hooked. And ever since then, like, I'll go back to other species and you're just like, oh, this is fun, but it's not the same. Like, I need that adrenaline dump. I need the thrill of the chase, the hunt. And then the last few years, I've just kind of, I guess, put the pieces together and had a couple good years. I think the last 3 years total would be 189 muskies now.
Last year, I caught 11, which honestly for most people is pretty decent. But for Jonah, he's like mid, thumbs down, boy. Just kidding.
That is good, man. That is good. I have people that I fish with that fish with me almost every weekend of the summer, and I think he only got 10 or 11 too. So
yeah, it's definitely a grind. And I will say, one of those fish of that 11, I caught when I was with Jonah, and he taught me how to jig for muskie in St. Clair River. We'll talk a bit about that later, but you're a really good teacher. You're really approachable. There's a lot of muskie guys that we talk to that are just like, solid the earth people like Jonah. And there's a lot that are just like super snobby about it. So we wanted to talk to someone like Jonah who's chill, because if you're just getting into muskie fishing, it's super intimidating. Like you look at the baits, like huge baits, huge rods, huge reels. The fish, by the way, they're almost impossible to catch sometimes. Remember, Andrew, when we first got into muskie fishing, like we've caught them over the years, but I think it was like 3 years ago where we're like, yeah, let's get into muskie fishing. We bought all the equipment. It's kind of intimidating,
It is. And it's expensive.
I was so used to like throwing a big bait, which is a J13. I'm like, wow, fish bite these?
Yeah.
Just like giant.
And then you see the muskie baits now, 16 inches. You're like, oh, how can anything eat this? And then all of a sudden you catch a muskie and the whole thing's down its mouth. You're like, okay. It works.
Yeah, and the muskie's only 30 inches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The way we do this podcast is we're kind of going seasonally. So we're not really going to talk about, fall fishing for muskie, which is probably the best time of year that most people like. But we're going to talk to Jonah about early season muskie, which in our neck of the woods is early June going into July before it gets too hot. That's the kind of the time period we're going to aim at. So pretty much late spring, early summer kind of deal. So we're going to ask Jonah a bunch of questions, and then we're going to, get our notepads out and listen, because Jonah's caught a lot of muskie. So I'm going to listen. So when it comes to early summer muskie fishing, Jonah, after the muskie are done spawning, obviously the season opens, fish are done spawning generally. If you're going to a lake, where's like some of the areas you're going to look? And I know it's going to depend on the lake, but just generally speaking, where are some areas that if you're a beginner, you should start targeting these fish?
The last couple of years, I've started kind of working backwards. So a lot of time people will go to their summer spots early in the season and muskies aren't there yet, depending on the temperature, stuff like that. So I started going to areas that I think they might spawn and work my way out from there. So usually that's like thick in the weeds, super shallow off shoals, stuff like that, grass mats, anywhere you might think a muskie might spawn, and then go right up in there. If you don't see anything, kind of start working out to the edges and pretty much you can piece together a puzzle pretty quick from there. And that's where I've been getting my success the last couple of years on opener.
Do muskie tend to stick around areas similar to pike, like with nearby current and stuff like that?
Mostly, I would say yes, but there's always going to be anomalies. Sometimes the places you find a muskie are extremely odd and make no sense. But for the most part, you kind of want to find somewhere that's got access to deep water, shallow water, protected bay where they would spawn, something like that. And then, like I said, start shallow, kind of start working your way out. Like last year, me and Connor, we were right in the weeds, and he's like, you fishing this? I was like, oh yeah. And within like an hour, we got the first one. He's like, man, I didn't believe you. I was like, I told you. They're right in there.
We've done some early musky season fishing, and yeah, we'll be going down this. There's a small river that we fish, and it's choked with weeds and lily pads, and they will be in literally like 12 inches of water sometimes. Yeah. And you'll just think it's like a log sitting there, and it's a giant muskie. Just
yeah.
I think sometimes, like, I think there's always muskie and weeds, but that time of year especially, I feel like there's a better concentration of them.
Oh, 100%.
And in areas you would probably not think of just because they're big fish. Like, yeah. You can picture a 2-pound bass being in 12 inches of water, but when you picture a 45-inch muskie, you're like, oh, there's no way it's going to be in 12 inches of water in lily pads. It's like, yeah, no, they're there.
I know.
It's terrifying. Like, don't go swimming.
I learned from the ice fishing in Quebec for muskies, the most action we were getting was in like 3 feet of water. So that's when I learned, don't be afraid of going shallow, especially early season. They might still be up there. You also got to think too, they've just finished spawning. They're hungry. Where's the food going to be, right? A lot of their food source is going to be in the weeds still, like the bluegills, the bass, everything, right? So
the ducklings.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything's super shallow, their food source wise, right? That's why I kind of just work out from the spawning grounds, because we know typically that's where they would have been a week, 2, 3 weeks ago before the season opened, and then just kind of start working out from there. Luckily, the last couple of years, it's panned out pretty good. So definitely a place to start.
Now, I think one thing that annoys me the most when I'm musky fishing is whenever I have a day off to go musky fishing, it's always the worst conditions. And not worse weather. That would be great to have some bad weather. That would be good. It's usually like bluebird skies, you know, super bright, like the worst
40-degree weather.
You want. Yeah, for musky fishing. So
it's usually the cold front just ended, and now it's like a really like hot, still day.
Yeah. Those are rough.
So I thought we could talk a little bit about like fishing in different conditions, because I think that's something that it affects all species of fish, but especially musky fishing. That can make or break your day, is making adjustments to find fish. And that's, I think, one thing that me and Andrew really struggled with the first few years we started musky fishing. We're just like fishing the wrong areas on those types of days. And then as soon as we made adjustments years later, after, you know, fishing with different people and learning, we started catching more fish slightly more consistently, like not expertly, but like we would pull out a fish on a tough day, which is good.
That is good.
We're going to get more into lures in a bit, but technique wise or tactic wise, what would be on one of those terrible bluebird, sunny, bright days? What is kind of like your game plan on that kind of day?
So my game plan on those days is kind of the opposite of what everybody tells you, which is like bright skies, bright lures, stuff like that. I go the opposite. I go black, dark, and I'm kind of doing like a pull pause, usually with a tube. I'm trying to figure out what the behavior of these fish are, right? Are they active? So are they hitting it in the pull when it's moving, or are they hitting in the pause? Are they looking for something easy, right? If I can kind of dial that in, then I can choose my lures better too, right? Like if they're hitting it in the pause, maybe I could start throwing a swim bait and just like slow rolling it. Maybe they like the fall from the tube, something like that. Or if they're hitting in the pull, I could switch to a bucktail or something like that and just get a bait moving more aggressive, right? So it kind of helps you dial it in. Those bluebird days, they're going to test everybody. Like I'm going to say 75% of the time, you're probably not going to catch a muskie, but the 25% chance is all we need. And then those days that it works out, you're just like, oh man, I can't believe it worked.
I'm a genius.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of my approach in those types of situations. And most of the time too, if it's bluebird skies, I'll try to fish into the evening. Try to get when that temperature starts cooling down. Usually the fish will start turning on a little bit then, especially after a hot day.
Another question would be about how you fish, because I know in our area anyway, some lakes are clear and some lakes are known to be pretty murky. Like there's a few rivers and lakes that we fish that are always like very tannic, or they're legit murky and mucky water, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to different water clarities, what's a way that you would adapt your presentation depending on those situations?
So muddy water, obviously I switched to like a brighter color, obviously like a white, maybe some chartreuse. Then I also like to add a hog collar. It's like a spinner bait attachment you can add to your bait, or a blade on the back of the tube. Something to give a little bit of extra vibration so that the muskies in this muddy water can feel it with their lateral line and at least have a chance to track down the bait in the mud, right? And then also just stuff with lots, like medusas work really good in muddy water too, because you get all the tails doing stuff, which causes little vibrations as well. Might not be as noticeable as a blade, but sometimes if everyone's throwing a bladed lure, the subtlety will work better. So it's just stuff like that. Always be mindful too of kind of what people are using on that lake, and you might want to make some adjustments from there because those fish have seen everybody use those lures, right? So like if I'm going to the Kawarthas, I don't use many bucktails anymore because you just know everybody who goes there is throwing a bucktail, right? And even tubes I'm starting to notice are not quite as good as they were a couple years ago, but you always got to just mess around, try new things, see what reactions you're getting out of fish. Are they with the glide baits last year? They chasing this thing like they didn't know what to do with it. And it just made them so angry they had to hit it, right? You just pay attention to stuff like that and kind of pick your lure colors too based off of, so if there's like a lot of perch in there, I'll probably throw some perch colors. Like that's more on the clear water side. The muddy water obviously doesn't matter as much, but go with something bright just to kind of give that halo in the water, like a little bit of a glow on the bait. Sometimes white does really good in muddy water. Places like the Thames, super poo brown all year. Yeah. And white works really good in there. Bright colors work really good in there. Kawarthas, more so I stick with the darker natural colors, black, perch, stuff like that.
It's funny because, like, again, we live in the GTA. We fish mostly the Kawarthas, and the Kawarthas are pretty generally clear. Yeah. So we generally use more natural colors, like you said. Like one of my favorite like tubes that I've been using, make all this noise picking up my lures, but it's this one I got from Waterwolf Lures, right?
We all heard that. We all felt that with our lateral line.
yeah, no kidding.
The mutations have started. But like this is a Waterwolf Lures 9-inch gator tube, and this is the color green pumpkin shad, and it's literally green pumpkin with some white on the bottom, but it's just like a natural, like almost like a bass fishing tube color. And most of the baits we had are like this color or just natural colors. And then when we fished St. Clair with you last year, everyone had the weirdest colors. It's like fluorescent pinks and, you know, just weird colors and chartreuse with dots and stuff that you'd never chuck in the Kawarthas, right? Yeah. But it's just because the water is murky, it's different. And it's not saying you couldn't catch a fish in either of those situations with the opposite color of baits, but generally those colors work better. That's why everyone uses them. So exactly. It was kind of a shocker for us, just even going to the tackle store, walking in, just seeing all these weird colors. Like, what the heck is that?
It's a shocker seeing things that are the color electric chicken.
Yeah, I know. The names they come up with too. It's like, where? I don't understand, but okay, I'm going to use it. It looks good.
It's like Barbie puke. It's like, oh, perfect.
Yeah. So I will say bright colors do work good if you're fishing lakes like Lake St. Clair, even in the clear parts of it, just because of how much bait there is. So say you're in a school of bait, right? And there's thousands of these silverish white fish going everywhere. Like if you use a bright color, the muskie now has something to key in on, right?
Boy, that thing looks sick.
Yeah, like it's with all the flashes going on, right? It's just one thing that they can narrow in on. Yeah, anywhere there's a lot of bait, sometimes throw on a brighter color.
So another question, and I think this is a great question because we talked to a lot of guides over the last few years for different species, and we've heard from a lot of them, the rule of thumb is most of them will agree that you shouldn't leave fish to find fish. I agree with that myself because we've left fish sometimes to find fish, and it's screwed us over many times. But especially with musky fishing, what is your opinion on that? Like, how long do you work a spot if you've seen a fish there? And then when eventually would you leave that spot?
So that's a good question. It would really depend on what I saw from that fish. Like, did it come in really hot on the bait? Is he followed it multiple times? If he's followed it multiple times, then I'll probably go somewhere for like an hour, cycle back, right? Let it reset. Other times I might just keep working down that weed line because I'm sure there might be another fish there or the shoal, and then kind of circle back. Other times it's just like, it's a transition spot that fish are coming in to feed, and I'll hunker down there for hours, right? And just kind of wait for that window to open. It's a tough one because sometimes you kill a whole day trying to go for a fish that it came in hot, but just after that was not interested, right? Something that I always still struggle with every time I go fishing. It's like, okay, should we go look for some other fish? Stuff like that. And that's the other hard part with musky fishing is you could go to all these other spots and there'll be fish there, but they might not show themselves. You're thinking, okay, I'm not on the fish. So then you end up going back, right? So musky fishing is very much, there's windows that open up, right? You can see it where all of a sudden like 3 or 4 fish get caught in a short period of time. Yeah, it's a tough one, and base that decision on what I've seen from the fish. It's basically how I can say it. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but sometimes you got to leave that fish and go find some other ones. And sometimes you got to hunt. If you see multiple, then there's definitely a reason to at least put in an extra hour or so there, right?
It's funny. The one thing I learned with musky fishing is there's lots of musky in lakes. Even like the Kawartha Lakes have lots of musky in them. And they're not actually overly hard to catch when they're hungry. But it's just those, like you said, it's those windows when they'll actually bite. So like you could fish a spot that there's a musky there, or maybe multiple musky, and go back there several times a day and not catch anything. And then the one time you go at a certain time that musky decides it needs to bite, that's when you'll catch it. Those other 5 times you fished it, it wasn't interested, or it won't come up, or it'll follow lazily. They only feed exactly when they want to.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. But speaking of windows, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the moon phases. So moon phases are like a big deal with a lot of anglers, but especially with musky anglers, right? Like me and Andrew talked about this with our guest last year about musky fishing. And what did you think, Andrew? What was your opinion on that?
I don't think that it has as big of a deal. Like some guys swear we're like absolutely 100%. I think that, is it have an impact? Probably. Is it enough to make me not, only go out or make sure I hit that? Like, I'll go out when I can.
Yeah.
I'm going to fish regardless. So for me, it doesn't play as big of an impact for myself just because I'm already limited.
Yeah. I will 100% agree with that. Like, don't go fishing just on the majors and minors. The fish will eat outside of those times too. However, though, I will go back to my spots that I've seen fish on those majors and minors. And more time than not, you'll get one, especially if they were in a pretty active mood earlier before the major or the minor. For example, like after years of doing this now, like you start to, when you're keeping track of it, you're like, holy cow, like 75-80% of my fish are coming in the majors and the minors here. So there's something to it. And then like the biggest example of it was 2 years ago. It was in the fall. So you'd always heard these crazy days on Lake St. Clair, people catching 20 fish. This was the day after the musky broke. And we're like, man, it got hammered all weekend by like 200 anglers. We're toast. We go out there by 10:30 in the morning. We had 11 fish, which happened to be that morning major. We go the rest of the morning and slightly into the afternoon with, I think we got one, had a couple of bites. And then the minor around 3 o'clock kicked in and we got another 10 fish. So we had 21 fish between the 3 of us. And we were looking, we're like, man, they were all in the major and the minors.
That was 7 fish per stringer per person.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Don't eat musky.
You kept them all. Yeah.
Straight to the freezer.
Body bag style.
Yeah. Yeah, classic Lake St. Clair.
I will say, though, I'm kind of in between. I feel like what Andrew is saying to a certain extent is you shouldn't let the majors and minors dictate your seriousness of when you're fishing. Because like, say you can only fish like, after work for 4 hours. Don't be like, it's going to suck today because I'm going to miss the major and the minor. Just go out and go fishing and you can still catch a fish. It's not like they don't bite. But at the same time, me and Andrew, like whenever we catch a muskie, we take a picture of it. And then at the end of the day, sometimes we will be like, you know what? We didn't even think about the majors and minors today. We just had this time and we fished, right? And then we'll look back at the picture and be like, we caught that fish on the major. And that's happened not just a few times. That's happened many times where I'm like, it can't just be a coincidence.
That's very true, because as much as I say, I shouldn't say then that I don't think that it would help. It's just something that I personally don't factor in, right?
Yeah.
And that's the most accurate thing, because like you say, there's so many times when you just look back and like, hey, guess when that muskie was caught? I'm like,
the major.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. Okay.
Well, then other times too, you'll see like you caught it a half hour before or a half hour after, right? And you're just like, well, if I would have just came out for the major, I would have missed that chance, right? And also, you got to have time on the lake to find where the fish are. So Like, you got to know where to go on the major and the minor unless you live on that lake or you know it well, right? But
Yeah. Like you said, just fish the day, but then be on your A spots on those times.
yeah.
And you'll probably catch fish. Now, if someone's listening to this for the first time and learning about majors and minors, I have a definition here that I just looked
Okay,
up.
perfect.
Major and minor, it refers to basically the lunar theory times, which are specific periods when moon phases are believed to influence fish activity. The major occurs when the moon is directly overhead or directly below a certain point. So again, the major and minor is going to depend, the time is going to depend on where you are, like location wise. So it could be different in different areas. So it occurs when the moon is directly overhead or directly below a reference point. And the minors occur when the moon is 90 degrees to either side. And many musky anglers especially believe that these times are prime periods for catching muskie. So it's complicated, but you know what? Most guys and girls that fish muskie will tell you that it is important. So just make sure before you go fishing, my advice would be look up those times. And regardless of when you're going to fish, just like Jonah said, make sure that you're on a spot where you know or you have confidence that it's a really good spot and there's a muskie there. And try to be on those spots at that time if possible. And hopefully you'll catch fish. If not, don't worry about it.
I would like to know if someone is like, if anyone out there who, again, I know there's lots of guys with, and for a good reason, will wholeheartedly push and believe in the majors and minors. I'm curious to know if there's someone out there who's like, I like it when it's exactly 47 degrees off.
I'm sure there is, man. I'm sure there is.
It has to be this exact angle from here, and that's the best time.
Like, I met somebody last year when I was on the St. Lawrence trip with Landry and Mike Nabalsi, who he was tracking barometric pressure, and when he was catching his 50s, he was like, look, I'm catching them at this exact barometric pressure. And I was like, what? I was like, you mean I got to pay attention to that now too? It's like, this is getting complicated. I just want to go fishing.
Yep, for sure. So I thought the next segment we could talk about is something that a lot of muskie anglers are going to have to deal with, is fishing for muskie and dealing with fishing pressure. So again, like we mentioned, Jonah fishes all over. Lake St. Clair, Kawartha is all over there. And during certain times of the year, all of these lakes are going to have fishing pressure on it, which means a lot of people fishing for muskie. Now, muskie are not dumb. In fact, like Jonah mentioned before, these fish can kind of get used to certain lures and presentations. So that makes them even harder to catch, which is total poop. I mean, like, come on, they're already hard to catch. Now it's like, now they don't, like, I did notice that on some of the Kawarthas that we'd be fishing bucktails and fish would follow them in and just be like, yeah, I've seen that before. They just turn away. It's like, come on, it's perfect.
They're like, this looks familiar. And then as they get to the boat, oh, yeah, I know what this is. Gone. Yep.
So the question that we have for Jonah, so when spots do get crowded, especially like when you think of like opening weekend, there's going to be tons of boats out there fishing. How are you going to adapt when you're fishing a specific area when you see tons of boats out there all chucking baits for muskie?
So that also depends on the lake. Like, obviously, a lake like Lake St. Clair, there's only so many spots. So you basically just get in line and drift as you saw in the fall. Summertime, not so much. Like, you can roam around more. But if I'm fishing the Kawarthas, it does suck because there's spots that you're like, oh man, I wanted to go there. But there's like 3 boats going around it. And so you'll go back maybe if they leave and give it a try. And sometimes you'll catch the fish that they didn't. Other times that fish probably got caught, especially around opener because they hadn't seen any lures for a while. They're a little bit easier to catch. My strategy for pressured water more so is kind of like what I was alluding to before about using something a little bit different. I try to trick the fish per se. That's why I like to use black in the Kawarthas, just because the fish can't really tell what it is. So they're forced to either come follow it, which now lets me know that there's a fish in the area, or they're forced to bite it because they don't want it to go by, right? They think it's a meal. They don't know what it is. That's my theory anyway. I don't know how true it is. It seems to work. And then I also like just try to use different lures as well. Maybe go down in size, maybe go up in size. It's tough, especially lakes like that, because there's only so many spots you can go. Other than that, you just basically got to start trying to find new spots. The fish aren't always on those spots. They could be outside the spot. So, for example, say you're fishing a weed line, maybe try off the weed line and into the channel where it gets a little bit deeper. Fish might have moved off there, especially if there's a bunch of boats hammering that spot, right? The fish are going to try and get away from that. It's tricky. It's tricky. But you basically just have to be thinking ahead of the people you're fishing against and trying to trick the muskies at the same time.
You kind of mentioned before about like fishing different times of the day.
Yeah.
So maybe incorporate that into fishing a pressured lake.
So if a lot of people are fishing during the day, then I would switch to fishing at night. So there's been studies with carp and stuff like that. And I'm sure it's the same for muskies. As soon as they get pressured, they kind of switch their feeding schedule because they notice that when they're eating at this time of the day, they're getting caught, right? So then they switch to eating at night. And so we've had great success on pressure lakes fishing at night. I think also you get the advantage of them not being able to see the lure. They're basically using their lateral line. So you get a few advantages fishing at night. Early morning, sometimes. Early morning's not always the best for muskie fishing, which is nice for us because we get to sleep in. There's always a chance at an early muskie, so I still go out early no matter what. Plus, I want to spend the time figuring it out. I have enough time in the day to hit all the spots and kind of piece the puzzle together before the major and the minor.
Night fishing is an interesting point because, again, we fish, like not even muskie fishing, but bass fishing. I caught my biggest bass in a very popular Kawartha Lake at night, like in the middle of the night, like not like 9 p.m. It was like midnight.
Yeah.
And it was an area that gets pounded by other people. And during the day, no one caught it, obviously.
Yeah.
And I went in the middle of the night and I caught it. And it's my theory, and I've talked to many people that fish these lakes about it, and I'm sure it applies to muskie too, is like you said, I believe that in pressured water, the fish pretty much become inactive during the day. They bury themselves in weeds or in deep water. And then at night, they come up or they become active. And then they actually feed at night when there's literally no boats on the water. And me and Andrew have never gone legit night muskie fishing. We've gone night bass fishing, which is scary. So I don't even know how scary muskie, like, again, we're fishing out of small, like a canoe. So I'm just like, I want to hook like a 45-inch muskie at night and not even see it come up and hit the lure beside the boat. I'll pee myself for one. For two, we'll capsize and then snapping turtles will viciously attack us. But maybe we should try that this year, Andrew.
It's fun. It's fun.
Down.
So
we got lights inside my boat now. So we can...
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, the nighttime fishing is a lot of fun. It can be intimidating and kind of scary at first, like, especially if you're fishing in a lake up in North Bay with lots of rocks and structures. So you got to make sure you got your routes on your GPS and follow those to a T.
It definitely helps to like know the lake very well, because at night I found even just bass fishing in like an area we knew well, once it's dark, it's like
it's completely
instantly
different.
You lose all reference points to everywhere and you're just like, where am I?
Yeah.
You're literally like 20 feet from the boat launch. You're like, oh.
Well, you can't see anything either, right? So you're just like, everything feels much closer to you now too. So it's like,
I'm excited. I want to try night fishing. That's a great tip. And again, be safe. Make sure that you have your navigation lights on when you're fishing, because some wahoos are out there flying down the river or the lake and you could get hit. So make sure you have all your safety gear on. Make sure you have, I would say my advice would be for night fishing especially, is make sure you have everything ready to go, like all your tools and stuff. You don't want to be frantically looking for your hook cutters or your net or anything like that when it's pitch dark and you just have a little headlamp on. Just make sure everything's ready to go. So when you do hook a muskie, which you will, because Jonah's tips are legit, you won't be literally harming yourself, because like Jonah mentioned, these fish can kill you. Well, he didn't mention that, but I mentioned it to me before when we were on St. Clair.
I don't know about kill you, but they can definitely do some harm. I've broken fingers and I've had some nasty cuts, and I've seen a guy a couple years ago, the muskie thrashed and it hit the tendon that coiled up into his arm.
Oh.
You definitely have to be careful. And nighttime, you got to be extra careful. Make sure you got good lighting, like you mentioned, and make sure you have somebody on the boat that has lighting, because sometimes you know how it goes with the headlamp. You're trying to get the right angle and you can't.
You put your face too close to the muskies and you put yourself in danger.
Yeah, exactly. Corey Maxfield last year on your podcast had mentioned BOGO grips. People don't like them, but they are great for when the muskie's in the net to kind of get control of them, especially at nighttime. You don't want putting your hand up there because you don't know where the lure is in its mouth either. If he thrashes and your hand's up in the gills and you get a hook on there, like that's a disaster, right? So
the lip gripper ones are nice too, and they're less prone to puncture and stuff.
Yeah, like don't obviously use them to lift the fish out of the water, but use it to just get control of him and like maybe pull his head out of the water a little bit.
They're great for like if you're working on a fish's mouth and you kind of have to pry its mouth open. We use the Rapala ones. They're just plastic. They clamp down on the jaw. They're not like the Boga grip ones.
Yeah.
Which do a lot of damage, unfortunately. But the plastic ones, you can like kind of pry into the fish's mouth with them in your pliers, and it makes it a lot safer. And I don't think they do any more damage than if you were just like trying to stick your hand in there. You're just going to cut your fingers open. Yeah. So Anyway, fish handling, we'll talk about a bit after, but yeah. Night fishing. Let's do it, Andrew, this year.
I was going to say, I did really like your tip as well. And it's something we heard before on the podcast from a couple others, not letting the fish know what they're seeing. And especially like on pressure times, going to something that makes the muskie have to either commit or follow because it just can't identify what you're reeling in. Like that's a cool tip. And as we famously know, muskie don't have hands, so they have to put it in their mouth.
Yeah. They're true. They're pretty curious fish. So like you'll get a lot of muskies that will just kind of follow lures just to see what it is, right? Like they might not be in any mood to eat, but they just kind of want to see what it is, right? They'll follow like maybe 10 feet behind the bait. And sometimes you can convert those fish, but a lot of times they're literally just curious, checking it out.
You know to go back in the major once you see it though.
Yeah. Well, that's like what I said, right? You locate fish and then you come back on the prime times.
So now we're going to get to the fun part, which is we're going to talk about the thing that musky anglers buy way too many of and probably only use 4 every day. And that is fishing lures. And then we're going to talk a little bit about rods, reels, line, all that stuff. But again, we're kind of focused on legit, late spring, early summer. We're not going to talk about, giant fall stuff. It doesn't have to be a big list, but maybe like 3 or 4 of your like must have baits for late spring, early summer, like opener time.
I would have to say number 1 would be a glide bait. We were talking about it before the podcast, the Spro Chad Shad. Even though it's technically made for bass, it's kind of right at that early season perfect size. You can fish it above the weeds. So like I was saying, if early season you're right up in those weeds, you can keep it above. You can suspend it. So if you notice like a gap in the weeds, you can suspend it there, right? And that might be a spot a muskie's hiding. And sometimes you'll see them. They just come out of nowhere as that bait's paused and just smash it, right? So you're giving them the opportunity to eat it basically by pausing it in those spots. That's probably one of my favorites.
They kind of have a derpy face, eh? You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Like if you look at these Chad Shads straight on, they just look like they're like, nah.
They look sad.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm designed to be eaten.
If you do get a Chad Shad, they're amazing. I have one myself right here. You got to upgrade the hooks significantly.
Oh yeah.
The hooks that come with it are like tiny, small bass hooks. You got to put like some legit hooks on that.
And add a split ring to the front because most of the leaders won't get through that eyelet at the front there.
Good idea. See, I'm learning stuff already. Hooray! Yeah. I mean, I already have this episode. So that's okay. All right.
Okay,
what's some other baits?
So I like spinner baits early. Some of the brands would be like the egghead from Handlebars, the smaller size. The big size works too, but generally early season, I'm sticking with a smaller bait, right? As the fish are coming out of spawn, you're going to get a lot of smaller fish in those areas. Bigger fish sometimes push out sooner, and the muskies hanging out behind are going to be eating like that bluegill size fish, smaller bass that are still there, stuff like that. So those are kind of the sizes I'm sticking to. Yeah, the glide bait, spinner bait, and like a paddle tail swim bait usually works pretty good early season. Haven't had too much luck on bucktail, but I know other people do.
Do you use any like dive and rise and stuff like that during early season?
Yeah, I'll use dive and rise too. Kasuik, not as much as I'll use the Spro, stuff like that. But yeah, it's another good one too. For the same reason, you can kind of pause it in those gaps, let it shimmy up to the surface. Because I'm fishing so thick in the weeds too, you got to be very mindful of the bait you're using, right? So that's why the spinner bait works good for getting through the weeds. The glide bait stays above it. Paddle tail, if you're burning it like a Shadzilla Jr., you can keep above the weeds. But a lot of the other stuff typically is going to sink right into the weeds. You're going to be catching it, and it's going to be hard to get it through. Those I'd say are probably the 3 that I would start with. And you don't need to complicate it. Just get a couple natural colors, obviously black. Go with a brighter color. If you can only have 2, black and bright. And then maybe if a third one, get a natural color.
I mentioned this last episode. We were talking about Martin. I was like, I love looking through guides, fishing boxes, or like guys that are serious about fishing, seeing what they had. And I noticed a lot of the guys that I went musky fishing with, I'm looking through their boxes and it's like black, 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 black. Like this one guy fished with, like I'd say 90% of his lures were black. And he's like, what other color do you need?
I would agree with that until you fish Lake St. Clair.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, man, everything but black.
Sometimes I feel
but black works there too.
Yeah, like with black in the Kawarthas anyway, or like even like, the Ottawa area.
Yeah, North Bay too.
Yeah, it's just a color that it's very visible in almost any kind of water conditions. Like clear water, it looks good. Dark water, it looks good. I feel like baits, as long as they're worked properly and in the right depth and with the right technique, I feel like color isn't as important most of the time. Presentation's more important than the color. Color can be important, but I feel like, yeah, there's lots of colors people are like, oh, these lures are made to catch fishermen. It's like, yeah, I mean, the fish will still hit it if it's a beautifully painted glide bait, if it's black, but like hey, if they're going to hit it and it gives you more confidence to have that beautifully painted glide bait, then go for it. But if you're just starting, you can't go wrong with black, in my opinion. And then that's just me, Jesse that caught 11 muskies last year, and Jonah's like, yeah, whatever.
Hey,
but we've done pretty good on black, right, Andrew?
Oh yeah,
the black and that green pumpkin color. Yeah,
that beaver you caught fish on last year, that was black, right?
Yeah, black and orange, and then like everything always had a variation. If I wasn't using black, I was using something with like a white and black contrast. It always had like a substantial amount of black on that bait. It works.
And like I don't know if muskies or fish see color, but the contrast definitely is something that helps. So that's why like black and orange always works good. White and black always works good. Chartreuse and white, even though they're not crazy contrasting, they work great. But basically, like when I'm picking colors, I'm kind of thinking of, so when you go to the Kawarthas, like most of the fish you catch, their backs are dark, right? Like compared to like Lake St. Clair, where everything's kind of like washed out and whitish. And that's kind of how I choose my baits. So if it's a lake like Lake St. Clair, where the fish in there typically are a lighter color, let's stick with a lighter color. If it's the Kawarthas and you see like the bass have darker backs, or like even North Bay, you go up there, you catch like a smallmouth up there and they're dark, right? Like black. So that's probably the main reason I go with those colors in those spots.
Before we move on, maybe Andrew, you can give me your top 3 baits that you say every beginner should buy for musky fishing. We heard Jonah's. What are yours?
Well, as someone who only caught 6, but one of them was a 50-something last year.
Idiot.
As a beginner, I say one of the things that I would keep in mind for myself is I really wanted to try a bunch of stuff when I got into musky fishing, but I didn't know how to work a lot of it effectively. Like if you can learn how to fish it, like a tube is great. Versatile, you can fish it a lot of ways, but it took a while for me to learn it. So if you're going to pick that up, make sure you know how to use it. Same thing with a dive and rise. But things like a spinner bait, things like a paddle tail is stuff that we're used to if you're fished bass before. Like it, cast and retrieve, and then you can start putting in little pull and pause. So yeah, like the Shadzilla Juniors, those are fantastic. I would definitely say, and it's not just because, Mike is awesome and he's sponsoring the giveaway, but legit, those are like, I would say probably my favorite large paddle tails. Those are them. Like,
yeah.
And yeah, even black fly lures. I mean, I'm a bit partial to them because I caught my first 40 on the black fly lures. It was the big bastard actually.
Oh, nice.
It's actually more of a bass, like the large bass one, right?
Yeah.
He's got some heavier duty ones as well. And they fish really well through weeds. You can burn them over top of weeds, stuff like that. And like a bucktail, again, something else that you can chuck and wind and are easy to work. If you are getting into it, it's so easy. It takes a lot to learn, as Jesse and I have learned over the years. And if you have someone who has experience and share it with you, make use of it.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to learn how it is, just eliminate as many variables as you can. So if you don't know if you're working the bait right, don't use that bait. Yeah. Use one you can fish right.
Yeah. Or just take the L's and commit to it until you get that bite, right? Like when I first started musky fishing, like I had very few people who actually did it that I knew. So I had to learn a lot of it by YouTube videos and just straight up going out there and experience, right? Now, since fishing with tons of musky anglers, like you pick up stuff from them, and like you said, you always want to be learning from everybody. Like even if they're a beginner, sometimes they'll use a lure you didn't even think to try, and the muskies are loving it, right? So like when you guys came out on the boat last year, you're like, "Oh, tell us if we're doing something wrong." Like I'll tell you if you're doing something blatantly wrong. Like if your figure 8 is really tight and a fish ain't gonna make the turn, I'll tell you that, right? But I'm not gonna tell you you're using a wrong lure or something like that, because I might learn something.
He's like, I didn't learn anything that day, but yeah, well, we're not complete wackos, just slightly. We always say, though, you can learn from anyone, and that includes, like you said, someone that just gets into fishing. They see things differently than you might.
And I will say, my figure 8 was pretty small. In fact, it probably wasn't a full age, probably like a 6 or a 7, but like it was seeing other guides and stuff doing it. I'm like, a figure 8 isn't something that I just stand still and like, just swing a rod in the water. Like, I'm not getting enough movement on that. I need a bigger sweep, bring it down, bring it up. Like, there's so many little things that you can do to improve the technique.
It's hard for people to grasp how wide you have to turn it in order for a muskie to actually make that turn, right? We're talking about a fish that could be 50 inches long here. Like he can't turn 90 degrees. So he needs a nice big oval, right? Or a big half circle. And you don't even need to do a figure 8. You can do an oval So if figure eights are a little bit confusing to you, just do an oval and try and get them eaten in the oval. And then you can kind of go from there and add stuff to it, right?
The figure oval. No, I'm lazy. Sometimes I just do the giant L.
Yeah. We've all done that. And then it comes and bites us in the butt later when that musky comes out of nowhere and you're just like, no!
Yeah.
I should have done a cursive L.
Yeah. Why didn't I do a cursive J?
So anyway, speaking of my top baits that I've done okay with in the last few years, one of my favorite musky baits.
We got to introduce our proper Jesse. Well, we've heard from myself and Jonah now, but let's ask Jesse. Jesse, what are some of your top 3 baits that you'd recommend to people?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm a big fan of the Medusas and the mini Medusa. It's not the small, they make a tiny, I think it's called the micro Medusa. The mini Medusa is a rubber bait with 3 tails and it's about 4 ounces. It's not big. You can chuck this on literally like a medium heavy musky rod. It's not big. And the fish, they literally just inhale this thing. It's not a big bait, but I've caught a lot of fish on this in different colors. This is a perch color one, but I have a black and orange one. I have a white one. Collect the whole set, right? Buy all the colors, right? But this is a great bait because I feel like for beginners, it's a pretty easy rubber bait to use because it's not so big when the fish grabs it that you have to really crank it through their mouth. It's a small bait by musky standards. I've never done this, but I've heard from a lot of guys that you can just cast and retrieve these and still catch musky on them. I kind of fish them, pull pause method. You can fish them in pretty shallow water too. They don't really sink super deep into the weeds. So that was a good one for me the last few years. I just use the color that I have the most confidence in. This is a perch color, but I've also done pretty good on the black and orange one. This is my other one. This is the slightly bigger size, but I really like this color. I think it's all black perch and it's like orange and black. Classic, right?
Yep.
And then one of my other favorite baits is just like a crankbait, like a super shad wrap like this. Like Andrew seen me do some damage with this bad boy. I fish it like a dive and rise. I fish it into the weeds, let it float up, into the weeds, let it float up. And that's like a classic fishing trick that I learned from the Linder brothers when they're fishing for muskie. And it's a small bait. It's, I think 4.5, 5 inches long. And it's made of balsa wood. So it's literally 1.5 ounces maybe. So it's not really a big bait, but it catches good fish. And you never know when you're fishing, you catch bass and walleye on it too, easily. Those have been good. And then I think Andrew said, a spinner bait for sure. We've tried a lot of different ones. I caught my first fish last year on a spinner bait. And this year I'm going to be trying these drop tine tackle growlers, which are very popular. I got this specific one for a pretty, dirty little river that I'm going to be fishing this spring. But
I got the triple deuce just because I'm ambitious.
Yeah. So I like spinner baits though, because like you said, the fish are in weeds, right?
Yeah.
Generally, and that's where we fish. And casting a bucktail, I'm not saying that they don't work as good, but I just find for myself, when me and Andrew are fishing, I catch a lot more fish on spinner baits because I have confidence just throwing them into the thick stuff and getting them out most of the time. And when we're chucking a bucktail, it has pretty much an exposed treble hook, and you pretty much pick up weeds all the time. And I just get annoyed. I'm like, every other cast you're picking weeds off your hook. But with a spinner bait, most of the time you reel it right through weeds and it comes out without anything on it. And sometimes those muskie are right in the weeds. So I just find it as a super, super versatile lure. And we've also done really good just trolling them behind the boat, especially if sometimes, you get tired, you're chucking big baits all day and you're like, it's time for lunch, So we'll just chuck our baits behind the boat and just eat a sandwich as we troll around an area. And we've picked off fish doing that too. So it's a great bait. You don't really have to worry if it's working properly. If the blade's moving, it's working properly. It's perfect. So those are, I guess, my top spring baits. We're going to get into the giveaway. I think one of my favorite muskie and pike baits of all time is the Shadzilla Jr. Again, not a giant lure. It's a 7.5 inch paddle tail swim bait. You can see this one has caught a few fish.
It's got some teeth marks.
Yeah. This is actually one of my favorite colors, but I just want to show off.
The one with the crunchy head because you've super glued it so many times?
It has a crunchy head.
You didn't use Mend It?
Andrew wouldn't let me use any of his Mend It.
It sits at home in my shelf and not in the boat. I know. And where did the glass bottles going to break?
I've used a butter knife. I heat it up with the camp stove and just melted it together when we're camping just to keep it alive.
Yeah,
it's caught more than a few fish. But one color that I'm really excited to try in the Kawartha area anyway is this color. I forget what color it's called already, but this is the Water Wolf Lure Shadzilla Jr. And it's
is that the ginger carp?
Ginger carp, yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks super good. It just looks like a carp. I'm excited to try that. It's just a very natural color. And I mean, it could really look like anything to a muskie. It could look like a walleye or any kind of gold, like maybe a baby smallmouth bass. It just looks very fishy. And I'm excited to try that. And actually, our giveaway this week, let's talk about that. So as we mentioned, me and Andrew and Jonah, we're all fans of Waterwolf lures. Again, they're made right here in Ontario. And a lot of baits that are popular in the muskie world, like say like a bulldog, great bait. I have more than a few myself, but we started using, Mike has his version called the Ratzilla. We picked some up at Musky Odyssey.
And that's the 10-inch one, right?
No, yeah, this is the small one. This is the junior.
Yeah, I love the junior.
Yeah, the junior is actually like a great size bait most of the time, I'd say, in the Kawarthas, especially early season. And it's like 4 ounces. It's not big.
Yep.
Andrew caught a nice
Easy
one
to
last
cast.
year on his, he had like one of those, like what, the high contrast white ones.
Yeah, it's white and black. I've caught a few on that, like a handful of them. Again, I don't catch a whole lot, but I've caught a handful on that. It's one of my best producing baits is the junior Ratzilla.
It's a great
and
bait.
Again, 10 inches long. I can cast it all day long. And I've actually caught some, like you were saying with the Medusa, like a straight retrieve. I caught them on a straight retrieve on that thing.
Yeah. I find the straight retrieve on that's a bit better than the Medusa. Just because like the tail is actually moving. The Medusa, sometimes when I'm just straight retrieving it, it's like the tails are doing absolutely nothing. It's not till you kind of give it that pull that all of a sudden they like flare out and they...
To describe this bait though, if you're listening to this, a pull pause like bulldog style bait like the Ratzilla, it's basically essentially a giant grub with 2 hooks and like a frame, like a wire frame molded into it.
Really long tail.
With a really long tail.
Not a classic grub tail, like a twister tail.
Yeah, a big, like literally a 10, 12 inch twister tail on the back. And you can fish them, like I said, many different ways. I've heard of guys that troll these too, troll them behind the boat. You can cast them, you can rip them, you can pull pause them. You can fish. I don't think there's like an actual wrong way to fish a rubber bait. Maybe just like skittering it off the surface would be bad, but I think generally you could probably catch a fish in most situations. Like
challenge accepted.
Oh yeah.
But they're great baits. They're very good price too. Like we have bought tons of baits over the years, and honestly, if you can buy something made in Canada that's the same or less cost than something that's from the States, I'm going to go for that because I like supporting local businesses. And Mike and Mary, his wife, I went to their workshop. They have like a full out insane shop. It's pretty cool. He does it all in house, him and his wife. They do a great job. And we've caught tons of fish. Like how many fish have you caught on like Waterwolf baits, Jonah? Like you can't remember, right?
Oh man, it's got to be close to, I don't know. I'd say getting up to 50 to 100 for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And
it's
some of his popular baits, again, Ratzilla, he has 3 different sizes. This is the smallest size. It's my favorite size because I don't catch big fish. But the middle size is like the Mag Dog size. It's the medium size one. It's like 9 ounces. I've used that before. And then he also has like a Magnum, but you have to do like 50 push-ups a day for like, 2 years before you be able to throw that all day.
Oh man, that's how you get hernias.
Yeah. And then like we mentioned, we have the Gator tubes, which have been extremely popular. This is the 9-inch. He goes all the way up to 15-inch. Like we were at Musky Odyssey this year working the booth. He had these tubes that were like the size of my arm. And I was like, who's chucking this, man? Guys do.
And then guys came up and bought them.
They're like, okay. You got any ones bigger than this? It's like, are you insane? I was like, man, I'm looking at them. I'm like, they don't look that strong. They will be.
It's funny because there are certain places that big baits do seem to shine, like the French River and North Bay. It seems like the fish do like bigger baits because the guy's trolling this like 16-inch lure, and that's the one that gets bit, right? So it's like, okay. So I started adapting and using bigger baits there, and it's paid off a little bit. So
if you're looking for giant baits, definitely check out Waterwolf Lures. I'm going to link everything below in the show notes. But what Mike has generously donated to one lucky winner who's going to win this giveaway is a $100 promo code for his website. So you're going to be able to go on his website. You're going to be able to pick up multiple, like if you don't want to chuck giant baits yet, if you're just getting into it and you want to pick up some Shadzillas, you could buy multiple packs of these, or you could mix it up and get a bunch of, there's literally an endless amount of stuff.
Get some tubes with some different tube kits because he's got jigging, he's got the casting.
Yeah.
Get some additional, trebles for the back that have the little blade on the back. Like there's so many different things you can get.
Yeah.
Like if you want to just focus on one style of bait and just spend $100 on that.
Just be a man, get the 15-inch tube. I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. But yeah, we'd like to thank Mike and Mary for that. They're a huge supporter of this podcast, and they help make this podcast possible. So we do appreciate that. We also appreciate them, donating an awesome prize to are one of our listeners. So Andrew, what is the way that someone can enter this giveaway?
Well, the easiest way to do it is to be a Patreon member. We send out a link and you just have to send in, you send us a little email, a little message saying that I want this. That way we know that you are interested in it, and you'll automatically at that point be entered to win. You just have to let us know that you are interested in this giveaway. For those of you who are not already a Patreon member, you can fill out some paperwork on the Patreon website and sign up for it. And again, send us a message saying that you are interested in this giveaway, and you will also be entered in to win that. So it's pretty simple. But yeah, we need to know that you want this stuff.
Yeah. We like to have the giveaways, people enter the giveaways that are actually interested in the product, because we've had some people in the past win stuff and they're like, listen, I don't jig for lake trout. I don't need these lake trout lures. So they were like, oh, do a redraw, and it was taking too much time. So if you want this, again, we're going to have 2 separate posts on Patreon. One's going to be like, if you are a supporting member that helps support the show, so me and Andrew don't have to pay for it out of our own pockets. Once you say, I want this, automatically entered. If you're not, if you're a free member, that's great. We appreciate the support, but we are going to make you do something annoying because you're not a supporting member. No offense. That's how it works.
Support.
And I think this one is going to be a popular one because I know this is a musky episode, but for anyone listening who maybe doesn't want to get into musky fishing, you can still make use of this because, again, for water wolf lures, the Shadzilla Juniors, amazing pike baits.
Yep.
A big bass bait.
Yep. Walleye. Big
Jesse's
walleye.
caught big walleye. Yeah. Caught them. You can get tubes, like 7-inch tubes. If you want like a big Laker tube, you can get a 7-inch like white tube with some jigging heads in there. So all that stuff you can get from Waterwolf as well. So if you aren't, fully invested into the musky thing, but make use of this giveaway if you want. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Or you could just, get the stuff and then
send it to us. We'll give one to Jonah.
Ooh.
You get the replacement treble.
I got a whole wall over here.
You don't need no more baits.
I got no more room.
So anyway, let's briefly go over. We talked about baits. One bait that I would like to add, though, it's the bait that I've really fell in love with the last 2 years is Jonah kind of talked about the jointed glide bait like this, Chad Shad. Very effective baits. Kind of like bass baits, right? But bigger ones for musky are very effective. But when it comes to glide baits, the one piece, like glide baits like a Phantom Softail, or this is a Hellhound. I just picked this one up at a Zoko. Actually, this color is called Prism Carp. Really liking the carp themes. The Prism Carp. But this is the one here I'm reaching for. This is the one here that I caught so far 3 muskies on. And this is the black hollow color. It's called Black Hollow Sucker. That one's good. I like to go, black. And then I like to go slightly more natural-ish. So that's my thing. And also, so you can see right there, there's a white one too. I got 3. So black, white,
Lake
and natural. Yeah.
For those of you listening and not watching, just know that right now I'm kind of making the face of like, I'm laughing and smiling politely. But Jesse has so many times with that Hellhound ruined my afternoon because all of a sudden he starts catching on it and I don't have one to keep up with him.
I made Andrew buy a glide bait this year, so
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I have a few now. I think I got 3 different
They're
ones.
fun to fish too.
Yeah, they're fun to fish, and especially Hellhounds and Phantoms, they're easy to fish. It is a lure that you have to impart your own action to it. You can't just straight retrieve it. It won't do much. But I found myself on those hard days where it's like bluebird skies, when you actually have to like entice the fish to bite with a reaction strike, glide baits are legit. Like it's constant zigzag, just constantly causing a reaction strike instead of just a straight retrieve. And there's been days like we went to this lake last year. It was tough, but I got 2 on the glide bait. I actually, on this exact glide bait, I caught one the first week of December in the Korthas on it. And I was fishing it just super slow, just zigzag, let it pause. And this fish just came up out of the depths of Hades and just right beside the boat in December, and the water was like freezing cold, and that's not even a giant bait. So that's another cool bait, especially for spring. And again, you don't have to use giant ones. There's also like a lot of smaller, glide baits like that Rapala makes and stuff like that I've caught fish on, like more of a pike size bait. But don't be afraid to go super small, especially for me. I catch small fish. What can I say? All right, let's talk about gear quickly, because I think that's one thing. Again, like lures is huge for musky fishing, that you could just get overwhelmed 100%. You're like, what do I need? But I think gear is the same way. So a lot of people ask us on Instagram, they're like, what rod would you recommend for musky fishing if you could only buy one? And I know that's going to depend where you fish. Like if you fish St. Clair and there's like 50 inches everywhere, it's going to be different than if you fish a back lake and there's like the biggest fish in the lake is 40 inches. But generally speaking, maybe give 2 different combos you'd recommend.
Well, you mentioned if I could only have one rod, that kind of changes it. I would go with a heavy action because then I can kind of fish the lighter baits and a bit of the heavier baits. But if I could have 2 rods, then I would have a medium heavy and an extra heavy, and that would cover everything. So I could fish the smaller baits, I could fish the heavy baits, and I could fish anything in between, right? For rod choices, I like the St. Croix just because you get the warranty with them. But there's a lot of good options. Budget-wise, you got, which is the Shimano one again? The
Compres.
The Compres are pretty good for the price.
Sojourn?
Yeah, the Sojourn, maybe stay away from that one. it's like a broomstick.
Yeah.
Chaos Tackle makes really nice rods, but they're pretty pricey, but their warranty's also good. But yeah, medium heavy and an extra heavy. Like, don't go crazy with rods. It's like, I got a medium heavy, an extra heavy, and a heavy. That covers everything I need. The other thing too is like you gotta be mindful too on the boats of clutter, right? If you got 3 people in the boat and everybody brings 6 rods, right? Gets pretty crowded.
The old floating porcupine. That's the
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You don't like, I'm a gear snob. I like having like different rods for different things. But especially I think when it comes to rod length, that's another thing a lot of people are wondering about. And it really depends because like we've musky fished out of pontoon boats. We've musky fished out of bass boats. I also do a lot of musky fishing out of a canoe. So like the length of rod you're going to use is going to depend on the boat you're fishing out of. Like in my canoe, a 7.5 foot rod is nice. I have 2 of them. But if I use a 7.5 foot rod in like a boat that has super high sides, it's going to be impossible to figure 8. Like I'm going to have to get down on my hands and knees to figure 8. So me and Andrew ended up getting 9.5 foot rods, which isn't even long. Like nowadays, like 9.5 foot rod is a pretty normal rod and like makes figure 8 so easy. So if you have a bigger boat,
it saves your back and everything too.
I'd recommend getting a 9 to 9.5 foot rod. Yeah, 100%. But again, don't do that if you're fishing out of a kayak or a canoe. So it really depends. In my canoe, for instance, the longest rod I can comfortably fish and land fish, because that's something you have to think about, is like reaching your rod out and scooping the fish, is an 8.5 foot
sticking
rod.
A 40+ inch fish. Like, this should work fine. As I've been saying, it's a great way to turn the rod into a hinge tip.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, if you can only have one length, 8'6" will kind of be right in between for everything. But yeah, if you have the options, a 9'6" is amazing for casting, amazing for figure 8s. The only problem is if you have a car, you're kind of stuck to only having like a telescopic version of it, which gets a bit pricier. But it's hard to beat that longer rod, especially for the figure 8. Yeah,
especially if you're lazy like me and Andrew.
Yeah,
it's figure 8s are hard enough to do all day anyway. So to have a longer rod, it makes it easier. So that's a plus. And I have a Daiwa ProRex 9'5" extra heavy, and that's not even an expensive rod in the grand scheme of things. And it's a long rod, so like you don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get a long rod nowadays. Mine was like $169 for the 9.5 foot extra heavy, and I've caught multiple fish on it, like decent sized fish on it, and it's fine. You don't have to spend like $500, $600, $700. Like in the olden days, if you wanted a long rod, you'd have to get like some custom made, super expensive rod. But it's not like that anymore. Most rod companies, even the budget ones, have long rods now.
Yeah.
We will put below in the show notes some of our recommended rods. We'll talk to Jonah a bit after the podcast. We'll put in some of them, and we'll just link it just to some of our local tackle shops. You can check those out if you're looking to buy a rod. And then I thought we could cover reels really quick. Gear ratios.
So gear ratios, that's pretty much season dependent for me. I'll switch to low speed gear ratios just because I'm a fast reeler naturally. So in the fall, when I need to really slow down that bait, I like the slow gear ratio for that. Summertime with bucktails and stuff like that, I do like the high speed just because one crank and that thing it's moving, right? If I could only choose one, I would probably go with the low speed just because I can reel faster rather than trying to reel slower. For me, anyway. Other people might find it easier the opposite way. For me, it's just like I said, I'm a naturally fast reeler already, so that lower gear ratio kind of helps me slow it down.
I like the minimal effort of least amount of cranks to bring things in.
Yeah, like I said, it's very season dependent. Like if I wasn't fishing Lake St. Clair so much, then I'd probably just have a high speed. There in the fall, it's the slower you can move the bait, the better.
There's lots of options for reels now. Andrew's used the Piscifun Alios 300. They also have a 400 size now. They're less than $150 for the 400 size, and I think the 300 size is like $120. So like, again, I know a lot of people use them. Andrew hasn't had any problems with his.
It's definitely a budget reel, but I mean, it's accomplished its task. Like
the 300 is really good. The 400, I know like 5 people that are all having the exact same issues, including myself. I caught my first muskie on it, which was a 49 and 7/8 on the Ottawa River. Next trip with it, it literally was like squealing like a pig. I had to lift up the thumb bar after every cast and stuff like that. So B1, like if you're going budget, try to go a little bit more, especially on the 400 size, to avoid that. But the 300, bulletproof. Like I've had that 300. I don't use it much anymore, but probably used it 3 or 4 years, no issues.
It definitely, for a lot of things, especially musky reels, just because they take so much abuse, is it does pay sometimes to spend a little bit more money on the reel than the rod, in my opinion. Like a $200, I'd rather have a better reel on a $200 rod than like a $500 rod and a cheap reel. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So now we have one of the coolest parts of the show where we actually have a lot of questions that people on Patreon and Instagram ask Jonah. I put up on Instagram, ask Jonah a question. And believe me, I got some extremely weird questions. Just kidding. They're not that bad. I did get some weird ones, but...
Oh, sure. I heard about the Bass Sando one.
All right. So here's a question. We're going to do the ones on Instagram first, and then we'll deal with the ones on Patreon. So Dylan asked you this. He said, what's the weirdest thing you've caught a muskie on?
A row bag.
Yeah?
Fishing the whirlpool at the Lower Niagara, completely out of season, on a float rod. So this muskie went into the current. It took me like 45 minutes to get it out of the water. I had no idea what it was on, what I had on. And I'm like on the center pin reel, like, I can't do any of that. Just like trying to pull it. And ended up being like 48 inches. And the rope bag was just right here in the corner of his mouth. We were all pretty baffled.
Here's a question from Gobi Stomper, your buddy there. He says, he asked Jonah, can you be my dad? He wants you to adopt him, apparently.
No.
He's a problem child. I wouldn't want to adopt him.
No, I love Cotter. I'd adopt him.
The guy's, he's a pretty good musky hammer himself.
He's getting there for sure.
Yeah. Here's a question from City Bass Boy. He says, what do you add to your retrieve for baits like bucktails and swim baits to entice more bites?
That's a good question. Bucktails, mostly just switching up the speed that I'm retrieving. Every now and then, maybe I'll give it a little extra jerk or something like that. But for the most part, a bucktail, it's just like kind of dialing in your speed, trying to get a reaction out of fish, and then you can kind of know what to do from there, right? So if you noticed I was burning this blade and the fish started chasing it, keep doing that. But if you're getting them on more of a moderate retrieve, that's the only really thing I could think of that I change up with the bucktail. What was the other one you asked?
A bucktail or a swim bait?
Or swim bait. So swim bait, something I do that not a lot of people do is with the Rover Cisco shed or the Shedzillas, is I'll actually pole pause them as well. So I'll let them flutter down, make it look like a dying fish, right? So if the fish are on one of those bluebird sunny skies or after a cold front when the fish might be lethargic, sometimes you just got to give them something easy, right? So, and that's worked for me in the past. Here's
a question from our Patreon members. We put up a question on Patreon and we said, we're interviewing a local hammer. We got some pretty good questions. So Jamie asked this question. He said, what are some modifications that you do to your lures, or do you just fish them right out of the box?
No, so I like to tinker. One of the things here, I'll grab it right now, actually. So these burbot, Mike's not going to like this. These burbot tubes that came out last year.
Boo. Just kidding. I have one.
I add the middle hook. So you have to kind of take it apart, add a split ring and a barrel swivel, and then poke it through the tube and add the middle hook. But the problem I had, especially in the Kawarthas, is because of that gap between the front hook and the back hook, some of the fish were just biting right in between the hooks. And I actually lost, I think, the first 4 fish that bit the burbot tube. That day after I lost one, and it was in a local spot to us that was a really good fish, and everyone's like, we haven't seen one that big here. And I'm like, I was pissed, right? So I spent the next hour just like ripping apart this tube. I add the hook, and we go to the next spot, and sure enough, we catch a muskie, and what's it hooked on? The middle hook.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I was like, oh, thank goodness. And it was actually the one that you had the picture of on your Instagram post today, that blondish one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I did that myself too, because I was just like, if I don't hook many muskie, but if I do, I'm catching it on that hook. And that's a cool modification. And that's the thing though, is like we said before, you learn cool tips from different people, and it may not be something that you think of. You could be like, you pick up a lure and you're like, okay, it has sharp hooks. This is good. And then you're just like, why am I missing fish on this? It's like, well, we figured out it needs a hook in the middle. How did this get through R&D like this? Come on, guys.
And sometimes too, it's just like the subtle differences as well, right? So, and then sometimes you just won't notice an issue with a lure until you use it, like I was noticing with that burbot tube. So I'm sure like on Lake St. Clair where you get a bit bigger fish, it might not have been as big of an issue, but I don't want to take that chance if a 50 comes in on it, right? I'd just rather have that extra hook. Other modifications, not really a modification. More
modification station.
Yeah. What I was talking about in the muddy waters, adding a hog collar to a swim bait, and that will give a little bit of vibration to help those muskies kind of find the bait. Nighttime too helps. A lot of tubes now come with blades, but back before we used to add blades to the back. Other modifications would be like adding weights to lures. Trying to see if I got one kicking around. Let's add those weights to the bottom of it. If you want to fish a lure a bit deeper, you can put one on the front too if you want more of a nosedive on a fall. Basically, you could do any combo you want with the weights. Yeah, I'm always kind of tinkering to see if something will work a little bit better. Playing around with color combos, trying to increase my hookup percentages on certain lures. There's no right or wrong answer, whatever kind of works for you, and don't be afraid to try stuff.
I think too, it's a lot of it is confidence. Like we were just talking about this last episode with Matt Martin, and I was saying that I'm a sucker for musky lures with twister tails on them. Like with the glide baits, like I like the one with the twister tail on the back. I don't know, it looks cool in the water. I don't know if it necessarily catches any more fish, but
it definitely has drying power for sure. Curly tail.
For sure. But say you buy one without a twister tail, you can buy these twister tails that go right onto your hook. Like these are specific ones that actually are designed to slide over the hook. But you can also add twister tails yourself that you already have. Like you can slice them open, you can glue them back on over the hook, or you can I've got like nails, heat them up with a torch, poked it through the twister tail, and then slid it over that way. There's tons of different things you can do to add different things to baits. Another thing that I do is I upgrade hooks. Like every single bait, I don't care how good the hook is. There's some brands like Waterwolf Lures, actually, I don't replace the hooks on his baits. They're pretty good hooks, but some baits you buy
and they sharpen well.
Sharpen well, yeah. But like some of the baits you buy, especially like say Medusas, for instance, I replace the hooks because they're sharp like for the first like half of the day, and that's it. Like you bump into a weed and the hook point just rolls over, and you can't really sharpen them well. So I definitely, especially on a bait that I'm like, I might only get one bite per day, I want it to have legitimately good hooks on them, and I don't care if they're expensive. Like I'll put it in. I'm not going to waste like weeks of trying to hook one fish to be like, oh, good thing I cheaped out on the hooks, you know. It's like expensive bait, expensive rod, expensive reel, 20,000 hours on the water, just like crap hooks, you know.
Well, exactly, right? Like in that, like you said, you might only get one chance that day. You might only get one chance for a whole weekend trip. You want to make sure you got the best hooks that you can have. Not necessarily the best, but something that will handle the situation. And then, like with that burbot tube, add in that extra hook just to make sure that if I do get that bite, there's a good chance he's going to have a hook in his mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
This opportunity comes only once in
Yeah, exactly.
Here's a question from Christoph. He says, what are your 3 top lures of all time?
Oof. I would have to say, for most fish I've ever caught on lures, tube would definitely be right up there. And then the rover bait Cisco shad has been really good for me the last couple of years. It's a versatile bait that just you can fish pretty much anywhere. You can fish it many different ways, slow roll it. What else? Kind of rotate favorite baits all the time. Like I just like to fish certain things that I find fun to fish. Like the glide bait last year was something that I really enjoyed fishing just because you could, whatever you did with the reel, you could kind of get the lure to mimic that. And so you kind of forget about not catching fish and you're focused on trying to get the best action out of the bait. And all of a sudden a fish comes out of nowhere and hits it. And it's like the greatest thing ever, right? I do really like bucktails just because it's hard to beat a chasing muskie on a bucktail. Figure eights are always fun.
Know.
Oh, you'll know eventually. And I really like the beavers. The beavers are were a great bait too when they first came out. But yeah, for 3, I would definitely say tube, paddle tail, and bucktail.
For sure. So I got one more question from you from Will, who's a guy that I actually went musky fishing with last year, and him and his buddy caught 2 fish, and I caught none. I'm not even going to blame the fact that I was in the back of the boat the whole day. It's fine. But anyway,
It happens.
no, Will's a super nice guy. Him and Jeremy, they went out and they showed me the lake. They showed me the spots, and they actually caught 2 fish. So any day you catch 1 muskie is a good day. Any day you catch 2, it's a really good day. So he asked this question. He says, how do you determine what size of lure to throw or troll? Is it body of water specific or time of year specific?
Both. So body of water specific for obvious reasons. Like we use Corthas as an example. Obviously the bait fish and stuff aren't getting super huge in there. Like obviously you do get some big bass and some bigger fish, but for the most part, I'd say like your bluegills and stuff in there aren't gigantic, right?
The primary food source size.
Yeah. So, and then like you go to somewhere like, exactly. You go to somewhere like Lake St. Clair and the shad there are like dinner plate size, right? So then you kind of want to switch to a bigger bait, right? So you just basically want to mimic the size of their food. And then season wise, obviously as the season gets later and the fish grow throughout the season, bait's going to get bigger. And obviously the fish later on in the year are looking for a bigger meal to stock up for the winter. So that's when we typically start switching to the bigger baits too.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that beginner musky anglers may be thinking, that they have to buy all these giant baits. That may be the case where you fish, but in most lakes, especially around our area, that's not the case. Some guys will say, no, I'm like right out after opener, they're chucking giant baits. And that's good. They'll catch fish on them. But I found in our area, you can do really well like with a Shadzilla Junior. It's like a 7.5-inch bait, even into the fall. So you don't always have to have these giant baits. And I think that's what's intimidating about it, because you're like, oh, I need to buy this specialty extra heavy rod and 100-pound line. And it just seems like super intimidating. But in reality, you can buy some like 7.5-inch swim baits and be like, okay, or a spinner bait. You're like, okay, I can go out and catch fish. And giant fish too are caught every year on walleye jigs when guys are jigging for walleye with tiny little, twister tail jigs. So like you don't need giant baits all the time.
Countless frogs are lost to muskies every year in the Kawarthas.
Yep.
This might help a beginner who's kind of intimidated by lures too. You got to think about when you're buying the lure, do I already have something that does this exact same thing? Like you could buy 100 different paddle tails that all do the exact same thing. Find the one that you like. And then if you're trying to buy another bait, is it going to cover a different water column for you? Is it going to fish a different situation for you, right? So that's basically how I look at baits. Same thing with color, right? Like, why do I need 9 variations of white? I just need white, right?
Because you need it.
Yeah. That's basically how I think about baits. And if that can save you some money and some time, not buying a whole bunch of the exact same bait that does the exact same thing, maybe that will help.
And I think too, like you said, you need baits that kind of cover the water column. So like you don't need like 10 topwater lures. Get 1 or 2. And then you don't need 50 bucktails. Like get 1 or 2, maybe 1 big one, 1 small one. And then you need stuff that fishes deeper. Like I think that's the thing that we really learned. We went to a bunch of musky seminars and they're like, you're casting on the wrong side of the boat. Like a lot of times those fish, they drop off into deeper water and they're behind you, and you're casting shallow and they're in deeper water behind you. So you need some baits that can be fished in that 10 to 15 foot depth. You may be fishing areas that the muskie aren't going to come up, 12 feet to grab it. So you need something that gets down. So you can literally have probably, I'd say 10 baits that realistically could cover most situations for most muskie fishing. You don't have to spend $1 million. You will eventually, but
yeah. And then, like I said, you could add the weights to certain baits too, right? So that makes a paddle tail extremely versatile to be able to fish it 5-6 feet down, 10 feet down, 15 feet down, just by adding weights to it. Yeah, always try to figure out what bait is going to be the most versatile, especially if you're just starting, right? Because you don't want to go buy 100 different baits. But if you can buy one bait that will cover multiple different water columns, multiple different retrieves, and multiple different times of the year, that would be the baits I would start with, which would be like a paddle tail and a tube, because you can kind of fish those any time of the season.
Well, it's been a hoot, Jonah. We appreciate you coming on. I'm excited. I know we were talking before we hit record. We're excited about opener. Opener's coming up super fast. We're trying to keep these podcasts like very seasonal. Like, so when this comes out, hopefully you can get some of these tips if you're just getting into fishing, musky fishing, that is. or if you are someone that maybe has difficulty catching fish, like most of us when it comes to musky fishing, some of these tips will definitely help you catch more fish and give you some confidence. Because I think in musky fishing, it's all about confidence, especially.
100%.
So if you can take any of these tips that Jonah has shared with us that make you just slightly more confident, I almost guarantee you will catch your first muskie this year, or hopefully your biggest one. Not Andrew. That'll never happen again. He's already caught the biggest muskie. It's not going to happen again. And if it does, I'm retiring from fishing.
I had to go to Quebec to get back on top.
But anyway, Jonah, we are going to put below in the show notes all of Jonah's social media links, so you can check out his Instagram. It is legit just all pictures of big muskie. Like, you don't even want to look at it. You'll just want to quit, because it's just like giant. Then there's a picture of Andrew holding a giant too on his page. But we'll definitely put links below as well. You have a YouTube channel as well. You got some really cool videos on like lure storage solutions, like on a budget, and some top baits for the fall. I know I've watched those a few times. You know, just see Jonah. He's a cute guy. He's just like, hey, here's some baits. My wife's like, who's that? I'm like, don't look at him. But anyway, I'll put all that below in the show notes. And again, we'd like to thank Mike and Mary from Waterwolf Lures for sponsoring this episode. It's going to be a sick giveaway. If you do win it, you'll be able to buy a bunch of baits that 100% are going to get some big teeth marks in them, which sounds bad, but that's a good thing, right, Andrew?
That's exactly
that's what you want.
For.
If it doesn't have teeth marks, it's not good bait.
It's a bad lure, like all these baits. But anyway, we mentioned last episode, but this episode all about early season muskie. Next episode, it's a special episode. Not that this one wasn't, Jonah, no offense, but next episode we have a fishing celebrity. We are very stoked that we actually pre-recorded it a few months ago. We're so happy it happened. We're not going to give you any hints as to who it is, but I almost guarantee when it comes to bass fishing in Ontario, you're going to want to listen to this episode. It's all about, what's the topic, Andrew?
I don't remember. Recorded it a while ago.
I'll tell you what it is. Frogging, flipping, and pitching in fishing heavy cover bass.
I should remember. I was the host.
Yeah. With a local expert and I'd say like a fishing celebrity. So
100% a fishing celebrity.
Yeah. So we're 100%. We're really excited for
very
that.
recognizable to
so that's the teaser.
Most of our listeners.
Yeah. You'll recognize this guy or girl or person. I'm not going to give it away.
Individuous carbon-based life form. Podcast. You will know.
Let's just say I've told other people that don't listen to the podcast or don't even like fishing, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I know that guy." So let's just say that. But anyway, we'd like to thank Jonah again for coming on the episode. We appreciate all your muskie tips. And if you do catch a giant muskie, make sure, if you're a Patreon member or on Instagram, make sure to tag us in your stories or send us the photo. We'd love to see them. And just make sure you tell us exactly where you caught it and what bait you caught it on and where you're fishing.
exact GPS spot, time of day, weather pattern.
Yeah. Moon phase, all that stuff. I just want to know it all. But anyway, we're going to end this episode with something that I didn't remind Jonah about. That is the quote of the week. And to handle that on the spot is Jonah.
Shoot. Let's go. Let's go with the one that my buddy always says. I don't get skunked. I just run out of time.